Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. We'll be looking at versioning. So first off, what's versioning and have you heard the term before? You may have heard versioning or smart versioning, and it's a smart simple function that's really helpful, especially if you want to change your system over time and you don't really want to work with test to production environments or any extra complexity. So, what this allows you to do is it allows you to store multiple versions of the same fields in a single location. So, that means you can reuse similar fields year on year to store your data, but as your requirements change, the look and feel of the grant can change along with that. So, a few things with versioning in particular, you do need to be a system administrator, so a global administrator with a system administrator role. And there's a few things to think about when it comes to versioning. So, typically, a few bits and pieces I'll recommend as you think about it are good naming convention, thinking about what you need to change. So, typically, before going into versioning or anything like that, what I tend to find more helpful is to go through your entire system, look at where you may need to make changes year on year, and then it's very helpful when you start doing this to generate a kind of practice. So take notes as to how long these changes might take you. When is a good cutoff time to say, all right, we need to have all of the change requests in by this date so that we can implement any new versions in the future. And also, where do you need it? Do you need it? So they have a lot of benefits in that they are easy to create, they're easy to modify, and they're also easy to test. That also means that you can preserve your legacy form's appearance. So that's a particularly frequent question where someone might call in and want to see their previous grants and the questions they would expect to look the same as when they completed that form, even though those questions' appearance or requests or options may have changed. So with that, I'll look at an example of versioning. So a quick note, if you are curious as to where it is in SmartSimple, wiki.smartsimple.com, versioning has everything in here that you would need. And I'm going to do this on the backup environment of a different one of our demo instances. So this is Engage. And I would definitely recommend for any kind of new type of function you're testing out, never a bad idea to go into backup first, try it out, play around with it, and then see if it's something that you might use. So, bearing in mind with versions, you are essentially creating a copy of all of your current custom fields. So, I usually try to have an idea of which fields would need change, probably have them noted down so that I can look at each one individually. And it's also useful to track which fields may impact different grants, different requirements, things like that. So if I want to look at versions, I would go to my 9 square grid up on the top right, my global settings, and under system, I can either start typing version, and I'll see smart versioning show up, or I can click under system configuration, versioning. So that will take me into the area I would create my version. So a few things with this. I am making a copy of all of my custom fields. So typically I recommend making versions as needed. And a lot of the time I find that versions are quite often used as a time capsule. So you are looking at your previous year version of applications, you're storing that, making sure that that remains okay. And then afterwards, moving into building your new version. So the version that already exists that can be used as your baseline is often referred to as your core field set. That is where you need to make sure that any new fields are added. So all changes that go into the future are from the core field set. So it's not possible to create a version from a version you've created. They will always be from the core field set. So with that in mind, good naming convention is really helpful. So to create my first version, I can use the plus here. I can give it a name, a description, and a condition. So the name and description are definitely the name is mandatory, and the description is extremely helpful. Condition is not always necessary. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a version that looks at 5 years of grants. So let's say that we're coming into a new period of time, or perhaps I might even be creating versions for a specific fiscal period. That could be an option as well, What would advise against is giving it names like version 1, version 2, version 3, unless everyone is familiar with what those imply and have that documented somewhere. So I'll call this 2015, 2020, and description, all grant applications within this time period. Condition, I can leave as is. Typically that might look at a specific period of years, but more frequently these versions will be activated and deactivated as needed. So if I was to walk away from this right now, nothing would change. However, if I went into my applications and I wanted to make a copy of, for example, my request manager, if I click that and leave it as is, it will automatically default to my primary level, my level 1, my grant. So I can take a snapshot. It'll say, are you sure? Yeah. So now that I have this, I could walk away from this and use that version for my grants if that's the only area that my changes are happening. If I was making changes to the activity against this request, for example, so maybe some of the payments or something like that might change, I can also select that level and take a snapshot. However, I would say if you don't actually need to make any changes there, I don't feel there's any need to take versions unless there's references back and forth. It's a very context dependent question, but just that's one reason that I would say the best thing you can do before creating a version is actually locate and confirm everywhere you actually need a version. So that can often save you quite a bit of time, especially in the future, and also gives you a good protocol for making change over time. So I'll come back from here and we'll actually look at how we would put a version into action. So let's say that, for example, I'm going to be letting my applicants work with this version while I'm creating this new version that's going to be launched in, say, 2022. So how I would do that is I'd go to my menu, go to my request manager, wherever you build that particular version. You can open your configuration settings gear wheel up on the top left. And then from here, the level that you have created that version is the tab you're looking for. So grant, in this case, my level 1. And when I scroll down, I can see that my current version is set to the core field set. So if I wanted to activate my initial version, I can select from here. I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to also show what the grants look like right now. So if I was to open a current grant here, I can see at the very top right, I could toggle each one individually to the version I've just created, or alternatively, I can go back to my request manager settings, and from here, I can activate this version so that it means all of my applications right now are set to this version. Any changes I make to the core field set will not apply. So how I would do that is scroll down to my current version, set it to the one I've just created, activate. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. And to confirm my changes, I'm just going to click Save at the bottom of my page. So now if I return to my request manager, open up any grant, take this one down here, I can now see that all of these have been set to this legacy version I have created. So this is, my up to 2020 time capsule. So if I wanted to make changes on the core field set and test them out on any existing form, I can simply change it to the core field set on individual records. And that means then that when it comes to launching this, I have confidence in all of the changes I've made. I can tell the differences and I know that it's good to go. So with that, then once I've decided I'm ready to launch all my changes, I can come back into my grants, into my configuration settings, and I can then reactivate my core field set. Then if in the future I need to create another version that's significantly different, that would then allow me to create another version as well. Core field set is where you will add any new fields, whereas you can edit fields on an existing version and you can pass them over to a core field set, but typically it's recommended to make most of the changes that are going into the future on the core field set. So that's something to be aware of. And the other note there is in our grants now, if we were to look at any one of these records, we can see that that version is still set here. And you can also search by particular versions. So if we go to our advanced search dropdown here and we look at grant common fields, we can see that the last option in our standard fields is by version. So we can actually say, okay, give me the core field set. And in this case, give me the 2015 to 2020. So I could search this and I can make sure I have everything selected and put this back to the appropriate core field set version. So the reason that I'm doing that is because if you wanted to remove or delete a version, which I'm going to do here, you need to make sure that there are no applications attached to that specific version. So in this case, if I was to try do that, actually, before I do that, I'm going to create a new tab, go to my global settings, go to my versions, and try to delete it right now. So if I try to delete, it's going to ask me for my password. Try that. Okay, so you can see here, this version has records dependent on it, cannot be deleted. All right, so I can come back here, update my records to the appropriate version. So from here, core field set, update. Yes, and again, all of this is a good idea to do on the backup environment, just because, of course, if there's any changes that you're not comfortable with, they will not have any impact on your live instance. I'd also be aware that versioning does not apply to workflows, so just being aware that if you do change fields, it's worthwhile checking any kind of references to make sure that all of your workflow emails and process work as expected. So now that we have this, I can come back here, try reload this and delete it again. So now I can see there's my version is gone. So that's a very quick overview to versioning, and I definitely recommend having a try at it on your backup environment. Think about changes you may need to make or want to make. One way I tend to think about versioning is I find it's very helpful if you think about your system like a house. So for example, if you needed to make some changes to the upholstery, maybe paint a wall, etc., that might not need versioning. It might be some minor instruction changes or things like that, but by and large, everything really looks about the same. But if you were making changes that might make your system look quite different, so for example, you're knocking at a wall, you're changing a lot of the configuration of the house, that's definitely a good example of versioning. The other thing I would say is if it's your first time trying versioning out, the best thing you can do for yourself and your team is take the time to make notes about how it went, what you needed to change, and that way the next time you need to run this through, you don't have to spend as much time researching how many changes you may need to make. You have a starting point, and then you can build on that. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks everyone for watching this, and please stay tuned for other videos. Thank you. Take care.